Tonight, President-elect Joe Biden blasting President Trump for challenging the election. As President Trump escalates his efforts to overturn his defeat, Biden calling him one of the most irresponsible presidents in American history. And the dueling messages on the pandemic. The White House task force holding its first briefing since July, but the president not taking part. And what Biden said about potential legal action of his own to force the president's hand. The new CDC warning Americans urged not to travel for Thanksgiving as COVID surges and hospitalizations hit a new record. Dr. Fauci speaking out on concerns the vaccine is being rushed at a third promising candidate. What makes Oxford's vaccine different from Pfizer's and Moderna's? Plus, inside the rollout, how will it work? Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's unprecedented visit in the West Bank, what makes his trip so controversial? The new dashcam video, a deputy opening fire at a car, 2 black teens inside, killed. The family saying authorities made a deadly mistake. Deep cleaning surfaces, does it stop the spread of COVID-19? What the science now says.
This is NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
Good evening. President-elect Joe Biden tonight using some of his harshest language yet about President Trump and his flailing and baseless efforts to overturn the results of the election. Biden calling Donald Trump one of the most irresponsible presidents in history as critical sharing of information about the coronavirus pandemic is held up. The president still refusing to concede the election or allow the transition process to occur. The Biden team tonight weighing legal options. Kristen Welker has late details.
Tonight, President-elect Joe Biden blasting President Trump for refusing to concede and for what he says is the message he's sending to the American people.
I think they're witnessing incredible irresponsibility.
The president's decision not to assist the Biden transition, depriving Biden of critical briefings on national security and COVID. Tonight, Biden leaving open the possibility he may take legal action against the Trump administration, although leaning against it.
My judgment is that we'll get further along by actually working with our Republican colleagues now. It's an open question. It could change.
So you haven't ruled it out? You haven't ruled out legal action against the Trump administration, against the GSA?
We haven't ruled it out.
NBC News learning from 4 people familiar with the discussions. While Biden is growing impatient, his team is also worried if a court rules against them, the move could backfire. It comes with both Biden and the Trump administration hosting dueling press conferences on the pandemic, including the first White House task force briefing since July. Dr. Fauci touting progress on vaccines.
So we need to put to rest any concept that this was rushed in an inappropriate way. This is really solid.
Vice President Pence delivering this message from the president.
Our task force, this administration, and our president does not support another national lockdown, and we do not support closing schools.
Biden meeting today with a group of governors, with some already announcing new lockdown restrictions, including closing in-person schools.
No national shutdown, because every region, every area, every community can be different.
Meanwhile, the Trump legal team pressing ahead with challenges to the election. Rudy Giuliani today alleging an unproven conspiracy of voter fraud in big cities, despite secretaries of state saying there was no widespread fraud, and the Homeland Security Department declaring it the most secure election ever. Giuliani today declining to provide reporters any evidence to back up his allegations.
So the answer is no.
The answer is I can't do it because I can't put a witness's life in jeopardy.
Meanwhile, this tonight from former President Obama to MSNBC.
These are just bald assertions. They've been repeatedly rejected by the courts.
President Trump has invited to the White House top Republican state lawmakers from Michigan as his campaign tries to overturn the results in that state where Biden leads by more than 150,000 votes. Lester.
Kristen Welker tonight. Thank you. And from the CDC this evening, an urgent plea for Americans to stay home this Thanksgiving as COVID infections overwhelm the healthcare system and test our instincts and our resolve at this perilous moment. Here's Miguel Almaguer.
With the U.S. facing a crushing wave of patients and a growing number of fatalities, tonight at this critical phase, the CDC is now urging all Americans to stay home for Thanksgiving. The unprecedented plea comes as 50 million plan to travel for the holiday.
Why was it so important for the CDC to make this announcement today?
We have been watching the cases throughout the pandemic and watching the hospitalizations and deaths, and seeing the dramatic increase over the last week, we really thought it was imperative to make this stronger statement today.
Tens of millions of Americans are going to disregard the advisory and travel anyway. What's your message to them?
To please still wear a mask. We know that it helps protect other people as well as yourself.
As our nation now averages some 1,200 deaths a day, in the Midwest, home to the most dire surge in the nation, 7 governors, Democrats and Republicans, are sharing the same message in this op-ed: stay home.
It's time, folks. We do not get any do-overs here.
Minnesota is also joining a growing number of states ordering widespread closures. It comes as many continue to mourn this Thanksgiving, including Merlin Gandara.
With COVID, you can't hold them. You can't be near them.
Merlin's mother, Ophelia, was always surrounded by family, but spent her final hours alone.
You go in there thinking you're going to be okay, and at the end of the day, you're not. You're not. You come out of there in a box. In a box, because that's how we're going to get my mom. In a box.
Tonight, the warning for all Americans: don't trade holidays for funerals.
All right, Miguel joins me now. Miguel, this is going to require a lot of us really to take a deep breath here and think about what could be at stake if we don't put off those family plans.
Yeah, Lester, the CDC says the risk is high because the numbers are through the roof. They've given their guidance, but this is a tough choice for many American families. My mom is a cancer survivor. She's within driving distance, but the risk is just too high. We're both going to play it safe and stay home.
Yeah, a lot of families having that conversation tonight. Miguel, thanks. With so many lives on the line, the concern is how can the vaccine be rushed without delay to those who need it most, as the Trump administration still doesn't coordinate with the Biden folks on one of the biggest healthcare logistical challenges in history. Here's Tom Costello.
While the Trump administration refuses to collaborate with the incoming Biden team on the pandemic response, the nationwide vaccine rollout will take months to coordinate. The FDA tells NBC News its review of applications from 2 vaccine makers, Pfizer and Moderna, will be expedited but thorough.
I'm promising you, your viewers, the American people, we will not cut corners when it comes to our ultimate assessment of these vaccines.
The Operation Warp Speed commander says the military is already coordinating a supply network through city and state authorities.
We will begin distribution of the vaccine within 24 hours after emergency use authorization is approved.
Pfizer will submit its application tomorrow. One distribution challenge: Pfizer's vaccine must be stored at -94 degrees. Moderna's vaccine doesn't need to be kept so cold. Neither does Oxford's vaccine. Oxford has now released early phase 2 trial data showing promising results in both young and older adults. In South Carolina, syringe maker Apoject is prepared to turn out 45 million pre-filled disposable syringes every month.
The advantage here is you have a single dose, as opposed to a 5 or 10 dose vial, which has to be pulled out and calibrated. Every dose is perfect and ready to go.
Tonight, Dr. Fauci says getting the country back to normal will depend on how many Americans are vaccinated and how quickly. The more who are, the more that sense of normalcy may return in the 3rd or 4th quarter of next year. Lester?
All right, Tom Costello tonight. Thank you. This crisis is now hitting many rural communities especially hard. Small hospitals not able to treat the sudden surge in patients they're seeing. Gabe Gutierrez went inside a makeshift COVID unit in Iowa.
Tonight in rural America, the scene is surreal. How exhausting are your shifts?
They definitely wear on us.
For Tina Failer, the past few days have been brutal.
Been with a couple nurses crying. You get to the end of your shift and we've done all we've done. So just the consoling of them and saying, you're a great nurse, you're doing all you can, we're going to make it through.
Here in Knoxville, Iowa, population 7,200, the main hospital has no ICU beds and must move the most critical patients an hour away to Des Moines.
You're right on the cusp of things going from ugly to horrible, and that's where they're living right now.
Hospital workers created this makeshift COVID unit over the summer, hoping they never have to use it. But things have changed over the last few weeks.
The average positivity rate in Iowa is now around 50%.
It's tough every day. We worry about capacity, we worry about the surges, we worry about what we're going to do.
Dr. James Law is just 3 years out of residency.
In March, we heard about this scary virus, and we hadn't really seen much of it around in rural Iowa until a few months ago.
The CDC reports that current death rates for people with COVID are more than double in rural areas. Across the country, at least 17 rural hospitals have closed in 2020. COVID restrictions this year meant the loss of elective surgeries and routine care, shutting off their economic lifeline.
It's really been an emotional roller coaster for our staff. Clinicians, as you know, are hard as nails, but even a nail bends.
Earlier this month, this hospital ordered its first ventilator. It's expected to arrive next week. Lester?
Well, we know those folks are working as hard as they can. Gabe, thank you. Overseas, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo stepped into controversy visiting the disputed West Bank and Golan Heights, firmly taking Israel's side in the long conflict over those territories. With more on that, here's Andrea Mitchell.
Today, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo trying to make it harder for the president-elect to reverse the Trump foreign policy, becoming the highest-ranking U.S. official to set foot in an Israeli settlement, land the Palestinians also claim in the West Bank.
Settlements can be done in a way that are lawful and appropriate and proper.
Another first, Pompeo also visiting the Golan Heights, viewed by most of the world as occupied Syrian land.
President Trump recognized that previous presidents had refused to do, that this is a part of Israel, and a central part of Israel.
And Pompeo announcing that products made in the Jewish settlements, like the winery he visited today, would now be labeled Made in Israel, a huge benefit to winery owner Yaakov Berg.
It's difficult, for me to express what we feel for the Secretary of State and for what he did for the Jewish people.
But further inflaming the conflict with Palestinians, like Nidal Hamouda, who says the winery sits on the family's ancestral land confiscated by the settlers.
It's a disgrace to international laws. It's a disgrace to everything we know, because the U.S. claims to be a country of laws and rules.
Pompeo continues his lame duck tour, still not acknowledging the Biden victory or allowing the State Department to pass messages from foreign leaders to the president-elect. Lester?
All right, Andrea, thanks. That trip to Israel happening as a new report out from the UN today confirms Iran is breaching the rules of the International Nuclear Agreement. It says Iran is stockpiling a much higher amount of enriched uranium than agreed to. But in an exclusive interview with our Keir Simmons, the author is urging America to not consider military action.
Based on the evidence you are seeing, now is not the time for a military attack on targets in Iran.
Well, I would hope there would never be a time for a military attack.
President Trump may well be watching this. Would you ask him for more time in Iran?
Your question presupposes that it's some kind of ultimatum that does not exist.
President Trump pulled out of that nuclear agreement in 2018. President-elect Biden has vowed to rejoin. New dash cam video showing a Florida deputy opening fire on a car moving towards a deputy, killing 2 black teens. Their families tonight are demanding answers. Let's get more on this from NBC's Sam Brock.
In newly released police video,
stop the vehicle.
Central Florida deputies shout commands to a teenage driver last Friday who appears to stop the car. And then this.
Stop the vehicle. Stop. Stop.
Brevard County officials releasing dashcam video and confirming the shots were fired as they pursued what they believed was a possible stolen car. The bullets ultimately taking the lives of Angelo A.J. Crooms, 16, and Sincere Pierce, 18, who was riding in the back seat.
What's going through your mind right now?
And I just feel like my whole life was just taken from me, and I know I can't get it back.
Pierce's mother, Cynthia, says her son was riding in a friend's car, not a stolen car. Shocked residents protesting on Wednesday as the sheriff's office says deputies were acting in self-defense, giving repeated verbal commands, 7 to be exact, before the teenager accelerates the vehicle towards the deputy, who was then forced to fire his service weapon. Authorities say a third occupant in the car, who was unharmed, confirmed hearing the verbal commands.
I don't think that it's implausible to think that they were afraid of the police officer shooting them. We've seen when people do comply, they get shot. When they don't comply, they get shot.
Both responding deputies now on paid administrative leave for the length of the investigation. Tonight, heartbreak hanging over a devastated community. Sam Brock, NBC News.
In 60 seconds, the threat to older Americans in isolation. All right, we're back now with our series, America Under Pressure, and the pandemic's impact on older adults. With more, here's Kate Snow.
Hey, Kenny.
Do you see us, Kenny?
Say hi to Granddaddy.
This is the only way Betty and Martell in Jackson, Mississippi can see their daughter Chloe and grandson Cannon outside Atlanta.
You want to cry every day because you miss your children, and if you got grandchildren, you miss them.
Because he has COPD, Martell is isolating in his apartment at a senior complex.
What's the biggest emotion that you've been feeling?
Mine is fear.
He's about to cry. Don't cry.
Oh, Martell, what makes you cry?
Because I can't go see my baby.
And see, that's my biggest emotion is sadness, because I know that's how he feels.
We are seeing really accelerated declines.
Dr. Louise Aronson, author and geriatrician, says the difference between what they hoped for and needing to avoid risk is affecting nearly every older American.
I am seeing people having trouble sleeping, having trouble focusing, and worried about, will this go on forever?
I'm going to stay with you, okay?
Okay.
And for caregivers like Phyllis Scantland, it's compounded.
I'd say on a scale of 1 to 10, my stress level's been about an 18.
A new survey from AARP finds almost 1 in 6 caregivers report a fair or poor mental health state. Her partner Bill has dementia, and Phyllis is alone caring for him.
It's really cut everything out of my life.
There are ways to help.
I love Al Pacino.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I like him too.
5 days a week, 61-year-old Venetia Prince makes calls to isolated older adults through an AARP program called Friendly Voice. For those physically able, Dr. Aronson suggests older adults can form social pods.
Small groups of people who agree to some ground rules and then are actually physically together. But people might wonder if that's safe. You lower the risks by playing by the rules, and as a result, you get the benefit of real human interaction.
She encourages families to teach older members to use technology to connect. That might lead to intergenerational cooking on Zoom or a grandparent tutoring math.
I think one of the things that people often overlook is the real importance of purpose in a life, having something to look forward to.
On Cannon's first birthday, Betty found a way to contribute.
We couldn't go, but I mailed everything for the birthday except for a cake and balloons.
Chloe is hoping to move her dad to Atlanta.
As soon as this is safe enough for me to pack up and go, I'm going.
Until then, there's this.
Okay. Grandmother loves you.
Granddaddy loves you too.
Kate Snow, NBC News.
All right, we'll be right back. Well, for all the disinfecting we've done since the pandemic began, is it still necessary? Here's Ann Thompson.
We've all played a role in what some call pandemic theater.
Places that we touch often, I usually wipe down with Clorox wipes.
Obsessively spraying and wiping surfaces, even though scientists say COVID is spread mostly through the air.
What's the difference between sitting across from someone who has COVID or touching a surface that has COVID?
It's really kind of the difference between getting a shotgun blast versus someone throwing a dart at you. So if someone is sitting across from you without a mask on, they're going to be expelling millions of viral particles. Whereas if you touch a surface, you're going to get a few hundred or maybe a few thousand viral particles on your hand. Not all of them are going to be active.
Still, we spent 52% more on cleaning supplies during the pandemic. Tonight, some store shelves are empty again. Clorox and Lysol wipes as hard to find as the holidays' hottest toys, making us feel good, but scientists say not doing much good to stop COVID.
It might give you a false sense of security, but it is still something that I would not advise against doing.
Especially during flu season.
That's why doctors say masks, social distancing, and hand washing are the most effective measures. Lester?
All right, and thanks. That's Nightly News. Please take care of yourself and each other. Good night. Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.